Dana ki jai, Shri Davan Dama ki jai, Shri Navadvip Dama ki jai, Shri Mayapur Dama ki jai, Shri Jagannath Puri Dama ki jai, Shri New Govardhana Dama ki jai, Shamaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Narayanam Naraskricham Naram Chaivam Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudirayat Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd Canto, 9th chapter, 21st verse. Is that correct?
Yes.
Parambaraya Bhadram Te Parambaraya Bhadram Te Parisham Nabhavinan Chitam Parisham Mabhiban Chitam Brahmanchaya Parishamaha Brahmanchaya Parishramaha Pumsamad Darshanavadhi Paranbaraya Bhadram Te Parisham Mahi Chitam Brahman Shreya Parishramaha Pumsamad Darshanavadhi. Responsively, Varam, benediction. Varaya, just ask from. Bhadram, auspicious. Te, unto you. Vada Isham, the giver of all benedictions. Ma, from me. Abhivachan Chitam. Abhivanchitam, wishing. Brahman, O Brahma. Shreyaha, the ultimate success. Parishramaha, for all penances. Pungsam, for everyone. Mat, my. Darshana, realization. Abhidi, up to the limit of. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. I wish you good luck. O Brahma, you may ask from me, the giver of all benediction, all that you may desire. You may know that the ultimate benediction, as a result of all penances, is to see me by realization. Responsively, I wish you good luck. O Brahma, you may ask from me, the giver of all benediction, all that you may desire. You may know that the ultimate benediction, as the result of all penances, is to see me by realization. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The ultimate realization of the Supreme Truth is knowing and seeing face to face the personality of Godhead. Realization of the impersonal Brahman and localized Paramatma features of the personality of Godhead is not ultimate realization. When one realizes the Supreme Lord, one does not struggle hard to perform such penances. The next stage of life is to discharge devotional service to the Lord, just to satisfy Him. In other words, one who has realized and seen the Supreme Lord has attained all perfection, because everything is included in that highest perfectional stage. The impersonalists and the pseudo-mystics, however, cannot reach this stage. Verse again, I wish you good luck. O Brahma, you may ask from me, the giver of all benediction, all that you may desire. You may know that the ultimate benediction, as a result of all penances, is to see me by realization. Mukam karoti vachalam bongam langayate girim yatkari patarham bande Shri Guru Dinatarane. even though the Lord is awarding all benediction, I mean everything, all benediction, all wealth, all beauty, all everything, kingdoms, beautiful wives, he's stating to Brahma that the ultimate benediction is to see Krishna, see him face to face. There are many instances of this happening in the Srimad Bhagavatam. People like Dhruva Maharaj and Prahlad and others, and many others, all wished some kind of material benedictions. But when they were able to come face to face with the Lord, they realized that these things were very insignificant and paltry and not worth striving for. And Prabhupada mentions this as the result of all benedictions, as a result of all penances, he says, is to see me by realization. So one can perform many penances. It is said that performing penance causes one to be hard-hearted. If you sleep on cement, if you don't eat, if you live very austerely in many different ways, you refuse to talk with others, and you live very austerely, you can not attain the highest perfection. But one who is doing many things and enjoying many things, seemingly, is enjoying a greater happiness. There was the instance of Pundarika Vidyanidhi, who seemed to be a sense enjoyer. He had golden spittoons, silk tapestries in his home, and for all appearances, he seemed to be enjoying life as a wealthy person and enjoying all the good things available in life. But when he heard about the pastimes of Krishna, he became very almost unconscious, and he did become unconscious when he first heard them. And it took, according to some devotees, 10 men to restrain him from ripping his clothes because he was in such a fit of ecstasy. So even though a person may appear to be very wealthy, it's difficult and actually impossible to know what's in a person's mind. There's an instance of a person who was a great devotee, who was a doctor to the royal physician. At that time, it was about 500 years ago, when India was ruled by the Pathans, by the Mohammedans. And somehow or other, the king was being fanned by a peacock feather. And this devotee, on seeing the peacock feather, fell unconscious. And the king asked him, why? Was he unconscious? Was he ill, or what was wrong? And he said, no, I'm not ill. It's just passing. And then, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, the king actually understood what was going on. That he saw this fan that was related to Krishna's clothing, and he became very stricken in trance-like ecstasy. So it just goes to show that outward appearances do not determine a person's Krishna consciousness. Very often we find that people who appear to be sense gratifiers are actually very great devotees. There was the instance of Kolavecha Sridhar, who was also offered many benedictions. He was very austere, and we read about him in Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Chaitamrita that he made his living selling plantain leaves in the form of cups and plates, and it was very austere. And when Lord Chaitanya offered him many benedictions, all benedictions actually, he said, "What do I need? I don't need anything. I'm just like the birds." He said, "At least you should have." Lord Chaitanya said, "At least you should have a roof over your house." He said, "Because it's leaking." And he replied that the birds are living in trees, and they don't care whether it's raining or sunning. It doesn't matter. They just don't care. And Lord Chaitanya was very happy to hear this. And there are many instances when Sudama Brahman came to visit Krishna on the recommendation of his own wife, and Lord Chaitanya offered him many benedictions. He refused to accept them. But later on, and it's narrated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, that when he got his home had been transformed into a beautiful palace. and his wife had been transformed into a beauty queen, and she was wearing very expensive silken garments. So it just goes to show that even the one who is very simple and very austere and very unconcerned with material wealth can get benedictions. In other words, one who is greatly benedicted, who wants actually nothing from Krishna, is sometimes awarded all things that Krishna can offer. And he, when Prahlad Maharaj was offered many benedictions, he said he didn't want any, but he was given many benedictions. He was given a rulership of a kingdom, and he ruled for many years, and so on and so forth. So benedictions can be had, but they're not for the asking. Krishna is not our order supplier. And I wanted to mention that one of the great devotees who made possible for the Krishna consciousness movement to develop was an editor called Jayadvaita. And even though there's a lot of criticism about him, at least we know that the reading of the words that were chosen, sometimes different from what Prabhupada had translated, are the reason that we're here today, and the reason that there are so many temples and so much Krishna consciousness. So I just wanted to say that it wasn't done automatically, and Prabhupada had certain faith in particular individuals, and he gave them carte blanche to do anything that they thought was necessary to make his work perfect. He said it should be mistake-free. And once the story is that when he was talking with some scholars who had produced some literature, many books, Prabhupada said to them that you will find in my books that there are no mistakes. So, I mean, there's something called the Editorial Review Board, the BBT Editorial Review Board, that's recently come into existence. But they have, I read their mission statement, and in their mission statement they say that one has to be very cautious in changing anything that Prabhupada wrote, or that his editors, Jayadvaita and Hayagriva, wrote, because they were trusted by Srila Prabhupada. They were entrusted to make his writings mistake-free and zero mistakes and quite perfect. And even though to this day, as we speak, some small changes are being made, changes in spellings, changes in punctuation, but the Editorial Review Board has, and there are many of them that are PhD scholars in English and so on and so forth. They include Kalachandji, Garuda, who's got a PhD, I think, from Harvard, and other well-known scholars. They have come up with a statement that they would only make very minor changes, and that's being done as we speak by the likes of people like Dravida, who are making very small changes in punctuation and spelling. Very small, very cautious. So I'm just trying to say that there is very little to change. And Prabhupada is known for saying that the disease of Americans was that they wanted to change everything. And some people have opined that because they wanted to change the phraseology or words that Prabhupada came up with, and that's been characterized as part of the disease, part of wanting to make unnecessary changes. Prabhupada selected his words very carefully. He also selected his editors very carefully by giving them the freedom to do the needful, so that his writings, his English, although it wasn't his original language, came out in what he called perfection. Mistake-free grammar, mistake-free spelling, mistake-free punctuation, and so on and so forth. And one story that I heard, and I think it's a true story, and some of you may have heard this, that Prabhupada was in a train carriage somewhere in India, and he was with a number of his followers or disciples, men and women, men in dhotis and shaved heads and kurtas, and women in saris. And there was one of his countrymen who was uninitiated, who happened to be in the same compartment. And he said the story goes, that he said to Prabhupada, "So you're a holy man, you're a sadhu, so I want you to perform a miracle. You can show your Vishvarupa, your many-handed or many-headed form do something miraculous. Show us what you can do. And Prabhupada didn't answer him immediately, according to the story. He just thought a minute, and then he gestured, putting all four hands out to his disciples, men and women. And then he said to the man, and he looked at him, and he said, "This," as he gestured to his disciples, "is my miracle." And there was once, I was present when this happened, there was a gentleman who came to the temple in Berry Place. It was the original Hare Krishna temple in England. And he was from South India. He was riding a bicycle and he was delivering the mail. I think in Australia they call them posties. Is that correct? Posties? But instead of having a motorized vehicle, he was riding a bicycle. And he was very dark. He was from South India. And we were quite amazed to see this person, because the first thing he did when he saw the temple and the devotees and the deities is he fell flat on the ground offering full dandavats. And then a very lively conversation ensued with him, and he was just awestruck that Westerners had become devotees. And he wrote a letter he was so impressed that he wrote a letter to Prabhupada, and he said, "You are performing the greatest miracle. You have converted beastly humans into godly saints." And Prabhupada liked that letter and that phrase so much that he had it reprinted in Back to Godhead. And if you want to ever see it, the Back to Godhead people have produced a CD or DVD called 51 Years of Back to Godhead, and it's in there. You have your miracle is that you have converted beastly humans into godly saints. It was very poetic, very beautiful, and it was from the heart, because he wasn't a poet, he wasn't a litterateur, he wasn't a scholar, he was a postman, and he was so struck that he came up with this phrase, and Prabhupada liked it so much that he had it printed in his forefront magazine, Back to Godhead. You have converted beastly humans into godly saints. So we think of Brahma sometimes. Sometimes he is known as the creator, Vishnu is known as the preserver, Shiva is known as the destroyer. In a way, that's kind of a misnomer to think of Brahma as the creator, because Brahma is really more of an engineer than a creator. The real creator is Krishna. Krishna can create things just by thinking about them. When we think about things, it doesn't really do much. But when Krishna thinks about creating something, he can create a whole universe just by thinking. He can create a whole planet just by thinking. And he's empowered some of his devotees with yogic powers to do such things. But he can do that. He can create innumerable universes. Nobody has that power, even though they are granted some kind of benediction on Krishna. And it's interesting that the verse starts out saying, "I wish you good luck." And what is the meaning of good luck? To live a long time, to not have any catastrophes, no deaths in the family, no COVID, no diseases. That is good luck. But ultimate good luck, as it is said in the verse, is to see Krishna. That is the best form of auspiciousness. That is the meaning of good luck. So he's saying, "I wish you good luck," but as it is said in the verse, you can ask for me anything you desire, but you may know that the ultimate benediction is to see me by realization. That is the ultimate benediction. So these words like ultimate and benediction and boon, they were chosen very carefully and edited very carefully. They're not just words that were invented by a poet. Even though a poet is one of the qualifications of a devotee, I think it's number 24 or 25, Krishnadas Kaviraj is in addition to being a great scholar, also a great poet. Kaviraj means king of the poets. That's what it means in Sanskrit, Kaviraj. And he wrote a book called Govinda Lilamrita, among his many writings, which is a kind of a poetic representation of Krishna and Vrindavan and the birds and the different kinds of plants, and they can speak and think, which is a very poetic kind of thing. And to translate poetry from one language into another is not an easy thing. In fact, it's almost an impossibility, because you have to know both languages very well. I know a little about this because I've taken my hand at being an author. I'm not very much of one, but I do know that you can't translate poetry from one language to another very easily. You really have to know both languages. So this book, Krishna Lilamrita by Krishnadas Kaviraj, and I'm reading it. I've read it a couple of times. Is a very beautiful book. And the translator of this book, there are many translators, but Banuswami was one of them, I think. And Kushakrata is considered to be the best translator, and that's the one I'm reading now, by Krishnadas Kaviraj, translated by Kushakrata. And it's available to get online if you're interested in this sort of thing. So it's mentioned that this is the perfection of benediction, of realization, is to see Krishna. And it's mentioned in the purport that there are different types of realization. It's also mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita that there's Paramatma, Brahma, and ultimately the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But these lower forms are not nearly as beneficial. Paramatma, the super soul within, or Brahma, the merging into oneness, they're not nearly as good as seeing Krishna face to face. So it's not that one desires to have many things. That's the benediction. That's the good luck thing that Krishna is. But what really is good luck is to want nothing, and wanting nothing is what is required to go back to the spiritual world. Srila Prabhupada has written that if there's even the slightest tinge of material desire, one cannot go back to Godhead. So one has to become completely divested of all material desire. It's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing to think that there is a spiritual world which is free from materialism, which is completely aloof from what we now know. And it's very hard for many people to realize that the perfection of life is to know that there is a spiritual world, and there is a person in charge of the spiritual world who can award anything we want, any benediction. It was even somewhat possible thousands of years ago for people to be giving benedictions to others. They could even, when Duryodhana was the king of his Hastinapur, before the battle of Kurukshetra, he was willing to give to. He had told in earlier life Arjuna that he would give him whatever he wanted, whatever he asked. And when Arjuna came to him to ask him another thing, he said, "If you want the kingdom, I'll give it to you." He was willing to divest himself of the greatest thing he had, was an entire kingdom. And yet he didn't do it, because that's not what Arjuna wanted. Arjuna wanted something else. But Krishna sometimes empowered people to offer boons that were impossible to imagine. We would never tell another person, "I'll give you whatever you want." It just doesn't happen. But in those days, people were empowered to give things that were very great. Whatever they wanted, their most treasured possessions, they could give away. Whether it was money, a home, or a whole kingdom. They were empowered to give things away just on being asked. That's one of the great things about Krishna. He doesn't have to be asked for anything. He just wants to give. And there are many cases in which Lord Chaitanya refused, and then the devotees changed his mind, and he complied with their wishes. One time he was refusing to meet King Patraparudra. He was the king of Orisha, I think, that part of India. And he said, Lord Chaitanya was saying that as a sannyasi, I cannot see him, because it's just not right for a sannyasi to see a worldly what he called pounds, shilling, and pence man that's interested in women and has a whole kingdom. So he refused actually to see this King Patraparudra. But later on, people like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and other very intimate devotees convinced Lord Chaitanya that he should soften a little bit. I mean, okay, he was the king, but he was also a great devotee. He was very devoted, and he said that he would commit suicide if he didn't get audience with Krishna, with Lord Chaitanya, who of course was Krishna himself. And when Lord Chaitanya heard this, he was very happy. A person was actually willing to give up his life. That is a symptom of a great soul. And when he heard that, he softened, and eventually he was able to give darshan to the king. We call it darshan when someone is able to, darshan technically means see or look at, or experience with the eyes, to give darshan to the king. And initially, he was doing this kind of indirectly by giving darshan to the king's son, the prince, who had a very beautiful look. He had a very strong Krishna presence in his look. His complexion was darkish, and he was a great devotee. And Lord Chaitanya kind of compensated a little bit. You might say he bent the rules a little bit to see the son of the king, although he was very worldly, a prince and everything. But he bent the rules a little bit. So this is a very instructive thing that sometimes Lord Chaitanya would bend the rules, so to speak. There's a system that's still current in Vrindavan, in the Krishna Balaram temple, that women aren't allowed on the altars. I had some correspondence with a lady who's very active. Daivi Shakti has a temple dedicated to Tulsi, and she said yes, Prabhupada sometimes made some concessions like that. A small concession. All the Vaishnava temples in Vrindavan don't allow ladies on the altar, but they do a lot of service. They do cooking, they do cleaning, they do many things, making of outfits and so on and so forth. And they're sort of the bedrock of the whole deity worship system, even though they don't go on the altar. But Prabhupada did bend the rules a little bit to do that. And it's interesting that the temples that aren't Vaishnava temples in that city, in Vrindavan, they're different. They allow ladies to go on the altar. So Prabhupada was sometimes very stern and very concerned about what people might do or think, and sometimes he was very liberal. He got a letter from one devotee saying that he thought that, I won't say who he was, but he was a musician. In his letter he said to Prabhupada, he said, I think my version of Govindam Adipurusham is the one that should be used, not the one that you like, that has Yamuna singing, leading a lady. I don't think that's proper. And Prabhupada wrote back to him very diplomatically, saying that, well, you have detected something that's quite important, but we're playing it here. Here it was the Krishna Balaram temple in India. He got this letter when he was in India. And so in a sense, he was really bending the rules then, because not only was it a lady's voice leading the singing, and it was played every day at the greeting of the deities, but also it had a kind of rock and roll beat behind it. And this was very much not liked by people of Vrindavan. There was also a controversy in Mumbai as the temple was about to open. I went there, so I knew about this. The controversy was that we should have a yajna, sort of a celebration, a dedication of the opening of this temple, when the deities would be open and revealed. And one faction opined that this dedication should be organized by Westerners. We shouldn't. Even though there was a lot of people in Mumbai and Maharashtra and around India who said that it should be done. It should be a week-long ceremony. It should be conducted by South Indian Brahmins, and it became a controversy. No one knew what to do, and the people that wanted Westerners to conduct it kind of won the argument. But when I went there, I saw a group of about 7 or 8 South Indian Brahmins conducting a week-long yajna in the temple. So Prabhupada had decided that was probably the best thing to do, even though it was kind of thought that Westerners should do it. And Prabhupada was very strong. And another incident that occurred, Shruti Kirti tells about this, that when Mr. Nair, the infamous Mr. Nair, although he tried to remove the devotees from the temple, was willing to take their money and ask them to leave, and he was a very vicious white-collar criminal. He died, and at that time Shruti Kirti was massaging Prabhupada, and he was the one who informed Prabhupada about the death of Mr. Nair. Mr. Nair had apparently contracted cancer, and he was in such great pain that he poured gasoline or petrol all over himself and lit himself afire. And he was dead before the ambulance got there. And Giriraj has confirmed that they saw the ambulance leaving. This really happened. So when Prabhupada was informed, when he was taking massage from Shruti Kirti, that Nair has died, He didn't immediately react and jump for joy, even though this man had made life miserable. I mean, if you read the first 20 pages of Giriraj's book, you can see how miserable he made life for not only Prabhupada, but for all his devotees by tearing down the temple. You know, so many things happened. I mean, he was a criminal, full stop. And Prabhupada, after about maybe 30 or 40 seconds after being informed about Nayar's death, he was the first time he'd heard about it. He said to Trudikirti, "You don't know." This is I'm not quoting it exactly, but words to this effect: "You don't know how much trouble that man has caused me. You don't know how much trouble that man has caused me." It's proper etiquette not to speak ill of the dead, and I think that was probably one of the reasons why Prabhupada didn't act joyous at the demise of Mr. Nayar. Anyway, I could probably go on, but there's one other story I want to tell, and I did write about this in the Conch, and that was how the morning walks got started. The morning walks became a daily affair for Prabhupada, morning walk. Sometimes he would walk so fast that it was almost impossible to keep up with him. I went on a few of those walks, so I know what it was like. And in those walks, he would sometimes tell very informal things. He would quote some Bengali proverbs. He would talk about this person, that person, in a very informal kind of way. And how it all started was back in 26 Second Avenue in around about 1965. There were a few devotees living in Prabhupada's apartment near the temple in 26 Second Avenue, and it was Labor Day, so almost all of the medical offices were closed, and devotees were desperately trying to find a doctor to diagnose what was wrong with Prabhupada, because he had some palpitations, and they could not find a doctor. And finally, Brahmananda, who tells the story, and I heard him tell it, and I saw him tell it. They found a doctor, and he was either drunken or aged, but a disheveled kind of looking guy, elderly man, and he diagnosed Prabhupada. And then Brahmananda took him aside into another part of the room and said, "So, what is your diagnosis?" And the man's mangy-mouthed man, I called him, said, the old man prays too much. He should get out. He should go for a walk. He should get some fresh air." And that was the beginning. And Prabhupada overheard that conversation. And even though that he was kind of a disheveled-looking character, it was the beginning. And every day from that time on, the morning walks happened. And Prabhupada said he has given some good advice, even though he didn't look like he was the giver of good advice. He said that it's kind of like taking gold from a filthy place or nectar from a pot of poison and so on. But Prabhupada took that advice, and even when they were, and Brahmananda tells the story, when they were in Switzerland, in St. Moritz, where the snow was on the ground like 2 meters deep, Prabhupada was doing his morning walk in the hotel corridor because he was so committed to walking every day. And those morning walks have now become legend. They're probably, some of them are going to even disappear from public access, because some of the things he says are very intimate and very private. But that's how the morning walks began. So that's the end of my talk. Went a little over time. Are there any? I'll read the verse again. "I wish you good luck, O Brahma. You may ask me, the giver of all benediction, all that you may desire. You may know that the ultimate benediction, as a result of all penances, is to see me, capital me, by realization." And I guess I'll read the purport too. "The ultimate realization of the Supreme Truth is knowing and seeing face to face the personality of Godhead. Realization of the impersonal Brahman and localized Paramatma features of the personality of Godhead is not ultimate realization. When one realizes the Supreme Lord, one does not struggle hard to perform such penances. The next stage of life is to discharge devotional service to the Lord, just to satisfy Him. In other words, one who has realized and seen the Supreme Lord has attained all perfection, because everything is included in that highest perfectional stage." The impersonalists and the pseudo-mystics, however, cannot reach this state. Any questions or comments or anything anyone wants to say? Yes? Sorry.
I'm sorry, it's just a comment. I really like when you said that Lord Brahma is an architecture. I don't think I've ever heard of that.
An engineer, I said.
Oh, sorry, an engineer, sorry. An engineer. I know this puts some more reality into it. Thank you.
It's interesting that there's a general thought that Brahma is the creator, Vishnu is the preserver, and Shiva is the destroyer. But actually, the more we read the Srimad Bhagavatam, we realize that Brahma was not actually the creator. Although he has the ability to create many worlds, the real creator is Krishna. He's not Brahma, it's Krishna. He is the original creator. Yes, anything else?
Maharaj, every time I read this chapter of Brahma, when he sees the spiritual world and everything, I am trying to understand. I asked a few persons the same question. For example, we have the Brahma Samhita on one side, and on the other side we have the Bhagavatam. And in the Brahma Samhita it says that when Brahma sees God, he sees God as Govinda. And he sees all the cowboys and the cows and everything. But here in the Bhagavatam, we have Brahma seeing God as Narayan with 4 arms and only Vaikuntha. So there is nothing mentioned about Goloka Vrindavan or Krishna or Govinda. I was just wondering why it's not mentioned that is that a different time when Brahma sees God, or?
Not necessarily. I mean, Lord Brahma is considered one of the most intimate disciples of Krishna. And when the 5th chapter was found by Lord Chaitanya, he considered it a great benediction and wanted that book reproduced, and Prabhupada even reproduced the Brahma Samhita. Because of Brahma's being so devoted to Krishna, that song, Brahma Samhita, is very highly revered. And the reason that Brahma has 4 heads, and there's many other Brahmas that have more than 4 heads and more than 4 arms, is because he was created by Krishna. He was given all those benedictions by Krishna. But as the verse says, that even those things, even having 4 heads and many arms and many heads and helmets, is not the ultimate thing. And there are many yogis who have powers. They can even create whole planets. But they're still not the ultimate creator. It's Krishna who is the ultimate creator. So whether it's now or in the past, the benedictions are offered by Krishna to anyone he wants to offer them to. And he can withdraw them from anyone he wants to, even now. And it's not just something that happened 5,000 years ago. I think someone mentioned in class recently that is it not poetic imagination or poetic license that we talk about Nanda having thousands of cows, and there are thousands of universes, millions of universes that we can't see? And the response was, Prabhupada's response was, you think I come all the way from India to tell you fairy tales? So even though those things sound, or the effulgence of 1,000 suns, that Prakasananda saw that Lord Chaitanya had manifested that aprakrita manifestation, that it's not just poetic license. There was a kind of effulgence that was not blinding, that people could actually see. So that's the how somehow or other these impossible fairy tale-like things are real.
Thank you. My question was more like, how come it's not mentioned at the point in which Brahma, after doing the austerities, he sees the kingdom of God, and he sees, in that chapter is written, he sees Lord Narayan. He doesn't mention, there is no mention about him seeing Krishna or Govinda. But then in the Brahma Samhita on the other side, we see that Brahma, after doing the austerities, he sees Krishna. So I was just trying to understand why it's not mentioned in the Bhagavatam that.
Well, what's not mentioned in Bhagavatam is also, I mean, maybe it's mentioned somewhere, I don't know, the Bhagavatam verse word for word, but it's mentioned in Brahma Samhita that Lord Chaitanya found the Brahma Samhita 5th chapter and that he revered it very much. So Brahma had the power to see into the spiritual world, even though it wasn't perfection, but he is a type of incarnation who looks after the material world. That's what he's designated as. So he's a demigod, not God himself, but a demigod. And it's mentioned in the Nectar of Devotion what type of avatar or what type of manifestation he is. That he is not the supreme God. He's just delegated. He's given these powers by Krishna to create things and to have 4 heads and 8 eyes and all that sort of thing. And there are many, as it's mentioned. That is also mentioned in I think it's Chaitanya Charitamrita, that there are many other Brahmas who have similar powers or greater powers and many more heads and more arms. These are some of the hard to assimilate truths of Krishna consciousness. Yes?
Maharaj, the Lord is alluding to this fact in the next sloka, actually, verse 22, where he says the highest perfectional ingenuity is the personal perception of my abodes. So it's just not one abode, it just says abodes in plural, so that could be taken as a general statement that, all different abodes.
Thank you. So we obviously have to read Srimad Bhagavatam very carefully. It's not just the verse of the day, but the whole thing. And with Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada said it should be read by all of you. He was talking to his devotees many times, not just once, but many times. And the same thing goes for Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita. I'm sure that they should all be read many times. Okay, I think we're going to end there. Thank you. I see people are gravitating towards the morning breakfast.
Yeah.